You can always rely on The Guardian to accidentally debunk a left-wing talking point. The hijab ban is a ban on Muslim women, says Iman Amorani. Well, I notice you're not wearing a hijab. Religious identity isn't something you can take off in public. The European Court of Justice has turned the headscarf into a symbol of resistance. Okay, well, for a start, I don't agree with the hijab ban ruling. I don't agree with the government telling people, or any government telling people, what they can and can't wear. I don't like that. But if this is a ban on Muslim women, and this is part of your religious identity, then you are saying, explicitly almost, that the hijab is a religious symbol, which very much goes against the narrative that the hijab is not a religious symbol. I'm sure you can understand this, Iman. Right. So, the European Court of Justice allowed the hijab to be banned in the workplace as yet another sign of the continent's obsession with how Muslim women dress. Well, really, it's a statement of intent. I mean, I understand why they're doing it. They want to outlaw Islamic symbology, basically. They don't want people being overtly Muslim and presumably overtly Christian because, and I know this is going to come as a shock to a Muslim woman, we live in secular societies. Oh, j'accuse. But yes, it's true. We are the secular West, and we're very proud of that, and we'd like to remain that way, and that's why they're doing it. Again, I don't agree. I don't really like government interference in this matter, and I think that this doesn't solve any problems. So doing this is an unnecessary way of exacerbating the problem. But maybe, I mean, it gets people to talk about it, which I suppose is something. The ruling states that the hijab can be banned only as a part of a policy barring all religious and political symbols, and so framed in a way that it doesn't directly target Muslim women. So maybe it's not really about Muslim women and you're just making it about you. Indeed, the Conference of European Rabbis was outraged. Oy vey. Well, I'm sorry, Rabbi, you'll just have to be outraged, just like the Muslim women can be outraged. And if you have a problem with secular Europe, well, you can go back to the Middle East, can't you? Where all of these backwards-ass primitive religions come from. Which is honestly where I'd like to see them return. You can be as backwards and religious as you like in your own countries, but in our countries, and I hate to say this, but they are still our countries, our secular Western European countries, which you are living at our good grace, you will follow our rules. And I don't even agree with all of our rules, but you'll still have to follow them. And, believe it or not, you are free to complain about this, which you are doing. But yes, so the rabbis are outraged. Europe's faith communities were no longer welcome. Not in public life, no. You can do whatever you want in private. Whatever you want. But you go to work, you can't be overtly religious because it's inherently divisive. You're no longer being an individual, and now you're declaring you're part of a group. That's the issue with it. And a number of religious communities, including Sikhs, will be affected. Well, they'll just have to be affected, won't they? They'll just have to go, oh, the horrific oppression of the West. I can't wear my symbol of oppression, therefore I'm going to have to move back to an oppressive country where I can be oppressed in peace. Of course, you don't have to be far right to welcome a ban on the visible wearing of any political, philosophical, or religious sign. Many liberals, too, believe that religion has no place in Western secular society. There's clearly no discrimination, they say, given the same ruling Christians would not be able to wear the cross. Well, that's true, isn't it? I mean, that's literally not discriminatory against any single religion. It's just discriminatory against religion. However, the hijab doesn't neatly fit under the bracket of being a religious symbol, and yet you're treating it as if it is. So it is at least in part a religious symbol, so in fact it gets banned as well. It's not the equivalent of a piece of jewellery that displays your pride in your faith, and which can easily be concealed to stop people feeling uncomfortable. For it's whereas the hijab is a core part of their way of life, linked to the way they choose to practice their faith. It's not up for debate, then that's too bad. Then you're just going to have to suffer under the oppression of not wearing a hijab. Awful. Awful. I mean, I can't wear shorts at work, you know, well, actually, I can, but I used to not be able to. Terrible oppression. Wearing shorts is part of my way of life. What? This is the point. It's a piece of clothing. If you can't bring yourself to not wear it, maybe you should move somewhere that allows you to wear it. Maybe you should move somewhere where it's mandatory. And there are plenty of places like that, aren't there? I mean, you've always got that freedom. And that's the thing we like in the West, is freedom. And that's why I don't even think this is a good idea. I don't think this solves any problems at all. But I'm not one of the European high-ups, and I'm not making these silly decisions. But Think I'm exaggerating? Consider for a moment what the real effects of a hijab ban in the workplace will be. Do we really believe that women who have a religious conviction to wear the headscarf are just going to take it off when they start their job each day? I'm sorry, but that's not how it works. Well, okay, I'm sorry, but if you have a problem with secularism over your religion, you're in the wrong place. That's just the long and short of it. Like, if me and my wife went to Saudi Arabia, I would have a problem with her wearing a headscarf, even though they would undoubtedly insist on it. And I know this because my friend and his parents went to Saudi Arabia, and they did exactly that. Apparently, the police of vice and virtue marched right up to his father, got in his face and screamed, and I'm not joking, "Control your woman," until he made her cover up. So, if that's what you prefer, that option is always open to you. But that is not what we prefer, and if the law says you'll have to take off your headscarf before going to work, then you'll have to do it. I mean, what's the alternative? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think we'll see an uptick in Muslim suicide bomber women? I don't think so. I think they'll just take off their headscarves and go to work and go, wow, I don't like having to take off my headscarf. And be like, yeah, but I don't have to like going to work, so sucks for everyone, doesn't it? Identity isn't something you suppress for public spaces. Actually, that's not true. It absolutely is. If, for example, you were some crazy sex fiend, like some sort of, you had a fucking like a fucking what was the Tarantino film, the fucking sex dungeon scene, that sort of stuff. If you were into all of that and that was something that you did, that was part of you, that is absolutely something you suppress in public spaces. In fact, identity is made up of many different things, many different layers, and you suppress many of them in different public places. Like, I don't go around saying, hey, yeah, I love fucking gaming and playing D&D and stuff. When I was having jobs, it wasn't part of the job. So I would suppress that part of my identity. Do you understand? It is literally something you do all the time, everywhere. Everyone modulates the way they are and what they say, depending on the public space they're in. I don't stop being a Muslim when I come to work and turn into a journalist. Are you saying you're incapable of being objective? Is that what you're saying? Because that's what it sounds like you're saying. I practice my faith in the canteen by not choosing the pork option. Is that practicing your faith, or is that just following a rule? Or when I ask for a soft drink instead of a wine at the after-work drinks, well, again, if that's how you practice your faith, then great. If by personal choice you can practice your faith, that's very lucky. Because in some countries you don't have that option. If my colleagues notice that I'm doing this, it makes them uncomfortable. Should I be forced to behave differently? No. And why would that make them uncomfortable? Your personal choice should not make them uncomfortable. Again, this is why I'm not in favour of banning religious garb. If people want to wear religious garb, that's them. You know, I don't care. I don't particularly want to associate with people who can't go a day without wearing some religious garb, but that's my choice. You see how all this freedom works? Isn't freedom a good thing? The hijab should be protected as a freedom because for many women it represents an integral part of who they are. No, that's not how it works. That's just not how it works. Like, there are things about me that I consider to be integral parts of who I am, but I don't think I should have the freedom to demonstrate and display them wherever I go because it might simply not be appropriate. If Muslim women are forced to choose between their faith and working in an environment that is hostile to them, they may simply avoid these workplaces. That's their choice. And I don't think the environment is hostile towards them. It's hostile towards religious expression. It's not the same thing. Maybe you can't see a problem with that. Maybe you think Muslims are the problem. Of course. If you can't see a problem with this, if you don't see the Muslim problem with this, then you must hate Muslims. Or it could just be there is actually more nuance to this situation, and I'm sorry, but in this country, you're not allowed to do that. It could be that. It's not necessarily against Muslims, as you've already demonstrated. It's just simply, this is how we do things here. And you have the freedom to leave if you want. If you don't like how we do things here. In fact, you have the freedom to bitch and whine about it on a national newspaper if you want. Christ, it's a hard life, isn't it? Ultimately, rather than increasing integration, which those who advocate the ban desire, really, the far right, God, they sound so awful. You make them sound less and less awful the more you talk. It will lead to deeper divisions in our society, with more Muslim women deciding to stay in spaces where they still feel safe and integrating less. there will be increased ghettoization and resentment. Okay, well, whose fault is that? If you refuse to adapt and adopt to the culture you've moved into, whose fault is it? Don't get me wrong, I want to live in a secular society, but you don't really want to, do you? You want to live in a society that you can have the say in. And if that means going against the rules that the secular society has laid down, then you will go happily against those rules. You'll argue against it. I mean, don't get me wrong, argue all you want, but these are just the facts. You know, look, these are the rulings, and they've done it for a specific reason. And if you don't like it, you have an alternative. You could even go somewhere outside the EU that is also secular and will let you do this. It doesn't have to be going back to Saudi Arabia or wherever. I believe that law and justice in this country should be removed from religious influence. But I also think that individuals should be free to practice their faith insofar as it doesn't impact on those around them. Okay, but if they are saying it's impacting on those around them, I would actually fight in your corner and say, well, they can stop being pussies, can't they? But I don't make the rules. So, what do you have to do? That does not mean being forced to succumb to the intolerance of those who are offended by the sight of a headscarf. Well, it does, unfortunately. No, I agree. I don't like this either, but unfortunately that is the life that you've chosen when you're in the West. For years, Western values have been used to try and control and manipulate the very women people claim to be liberating. During the War of Independence in Algeria in 1958, French propaganda posters showed two faces. This is good. This is relevant, you see. One veiled, one unveiled with the slogan, "Are you not pretty? Then unveil yourself," alongside the French stage mass unveiling ceremonies in which Algerian women would have their veils removed to show they had chosen the side of the colonizers. Well, I mean, that's true. They did do that. I'm amazed that you don't see the veil as a form of oppression, but I'm guessing that's because you live in a country where you actually have the choice to wear the veil. In many Muslim countries, they do not have a choice to wear the veil, and they rightly view it as a tool of oppression, which presumably is what these mass unveiling ceremonies were about. I have friends who have taken to wearing the hijab in recent years because they feel their Muslim identity has been threatened. Good! Do you understand? Good! You're not meant to have an identity of Muslim first. Fucking hell, that's the problem. It's this Muslim identity that is causing this ghettoization, in my opinion. The fact that you have, well, I have to be Muslim, I have to be Muslim. No, you have to be British. That's what you came here for, isn't it? Because that is what the general public believed you came here for. Because you thought, this country suits me better. I would prefer to live in that country because I think they run things better than the way they run things in my country. I want to join them and be British. If you don't want to be British and you instead want to be Muslim, which apparently is incompatible, and I'm only saying that because you wrote this article complaining, or it's European, complaining that European values are not compatible with your values as a person. So you have to ask yourself, what are you doing here? I would never go to another country, move to like Bangladesh or something and be like, right, okay, this is now like, I'm British. I would be like, no, I'm a Bangladeshi citizen. I'm trying to integrate into the culture. I'd never move to Tibet and sit there and act like I wasn't a Tibetan. I would try and be a Tibetan, which was presumably why I moved there in the first place. And if I didn't, why would I and millions of other British people move to Tibet if we weren't going to be Tibetan? Is it like a new form of colonization? Is it not? I mean, that sounds like it to me. If millions of British people started moving to like another foreign country, like Tibet or something, and started acting in a completely different and counteractive way to the way the local culture is, and we refuse to integrate and change, I think that could legitimately be described as a form of colonization. So what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Do you even know yourself? You haven't even asked. And again, this is coming from someone on your side. I disagree with the fucking hijab ban because I am a liberal. I am on that side. But you aren't thinking about the greater picture. You're not thinking about what this means for other people. And this is the result of that. Awful as it is, but this is what you're doing. But I love you're turning the hijab into a symbol of resistance. There are undoubtedly millions of women in the Middle East who are just telling you, just shut the fuck up, love.